Hello, welcome back to the lead pile. In this video, we're continuing our Napoleonic series as we paint up some 6mm Polish. So, let's get on with it. So here are the uniforms that we'll be painting today for our Polish. Now, the Polish uniforms at this time, during the Dutchy of Warsaw, looked quite similar to the French, who were their allies, in that they both had dark blue with white jacket lapels and red cuffs. However, as you can see, there are some differences, notably the headgear, which is harder to model when you're using MDF figures, but also the fact that the Poles here have a yellow collar, which is quite evident, and in this example are wearing dark blue trousers. So those are the two main points of distinction that we will see. Of course, when we're also using them on the battlefield, they are going to have French flags for the French, and they'll have Polish flags for the Poles. So even though the uniforms are quite similar compared to like the Neuchâtel battalion that we painted earlier, the flags will help as well. Yes, so here are the minis that we're painting today. These are MDF miniatures from Commission Figurines. So although the Poles are perhaps most famously known in terms of military for their extraordinary winged hussars, which if you haven't read about them, check them out because they are, quite frankly, they're like angels of death riding on cavalry. It's just amazing. Check them out. Every army relied on basic infantry as well. So slightly less exciting, but we're going to be painting Napoleonic infantry in this video. Now, Poland, perhaps of all countries in Europe, have historically had it rather tough, I think it's fair to say. Their nation has achieved greatness, such as during their Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which spanned from 1569 to 1795. During this time, Poland was indeed one of Europe's great powers. However, it has also suffered despair. After the highs achieved during this Commonwealth came the hardest of falls, as their opportunistic and much larger, powerful neighbours, Prussia, Austria and Russia, decided they'd had enough of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and gradually, over successional partitions, they carved up Poland to the point where it was essentially wiped off the map altogether. Although in contemporary times we are well aware of the horrible oppression by both the Soviet Union, or Russia, and Nazi Germany during the Second World War, and the crimes and tragedy that befell Poland, the struggle of Poles has been ongoing way before that. At the start of the Napoleonic period, Poland and Lithuania, as their Commonwealth, were partitioned 3 times by Austria, Prussia and Russia, with each partition increasing in size until the state was wiped off the face of the map. Poland wouldn't regain independence for over 123 years. During this time, the Prussian occupiers in particular banned the Polish language from their annexed part of the country, insisting that German be spoken as the national language. The Polish culture was under threat. However, during this time, in 1806, a little-known figure by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte entered the story. Although for many in Europe, Napoleon and the French were seen as tyrants, in Poland he was perhaps seen as their opportunity for salvation. While fighting the Prussian army, Napoleon had seen that very few Prussian units had been left to garrison Poland. So, ever the man for an opportunity, he organised for a Polish uprising, led by a General Dąbrowski. With eventual help from the advancing French units, General Dąbrowski was able to organise significantly sized Polish force to harass and regain control of parts of the Greater Poland territory from their Prussian occupiers. They managed to successfully carve out their own part of Poland once again. The Polish uprising facilitated the advancing French army, who then were able to occupy the region and liberate it from Prussia. This was then formally ceded to France by Prussia, following the Treaty of Tilsit. Napoleon had been asked at the time, supposedly, whether he would subsequently create a Polish state. And Napoleon answered, "Well, I will see whether the Poles are worthy of a nation." Not quite sure why he was Italian there, but well, they certainly had shown spirit, and Napoleon created the subsequent Dutchy of Warsaw in this region, which was effectively a resurgence of Poland and Polish culture, although as a French client state. But the Poles would take it for now. Although the Poles had won their country back in at least some form, this was not to last. Napoleon famously bit off more than he could chew, and after a humiliating and bloody failed invasion of Russia, in which many of the Polish soldiers had fought as part of his Grand Armée, he had to fall right back to France and essentially abandon garrisoning the Dutchy of Warsaw. And well, with the French army having left the territory, the wolves were back at the door again. Russia and a resurged Prussia again regained this territory via the Congress of Vienna. Poland's difficult struggle throughout its existence has resulted in a stoic determination from their people and soldiers, and during the Napoleonic period they did indeed give a fine account of themselves, proving very worthy allies to the superior French army. Indeed, it's even been argued that they made for better marksmen than the French units, but they simply lacked the sort of equipment that the French had, instead using old Prussian and Italian muskets. While the French were famed for their attack tactics, the Poles were equally skilled on the defensive, in particular against Russia, Prussia, and Austria. They also made for very effective urban, close-quarter soldiers, where they proved themselves vital in battles at Saragossa against the Spaniards and Smolensk against the Russian Empire. One particular notable example of the courage and skill of Polish soldiers was at the famous Battle of Leipzig in 1813. Under the command again of Dąbrowski, the Poles marched out of their defensive position at Weiderlitz and directly assaulted the Russians, who massively outnumbered the Poles both in terms of men and firepower. Many times they were attacked and pushed, but they pressed on. The Russian commander even reportedly claimed that he assumed Napoleon himself must have been marching up to attack him in the formation, such was the drive of the Polish soldiers. Again, at Gulf, the Prussians praised the determination of their Polish adversaries for fending off waves after wave of Russian-Prussian attack before finally having to withdraw, but withdraw in good order. No turning and fleeing, the Poles maintained excellent discipline. One Prussian by the name of Graf Henckel von Donnersmarck, brilliant name, said of the Poles, "When the Poles and Russians clashed in this campaign, they always did so violently, asking for and giving no quarter." So deep was the hatred between these two nations that are at once so similar and yet so dissimilar. Polish soldiers would go on to exhibit such bravery and fighting courage in the years that followed, before finally regaining their independence as a country after World War I with the Treaty of Versailles. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and this very brief history of the Duchy of Warsaw. It itself was a brief duchy, only existing for a short period before Napoleon's withdrawal after the invasion of Russia. These minis were really easy to paint. Again, as you can see, I just slapped on blue paint over most of the mini and then painted in the lapels in white. The cuffs and hands, as I've said in all of my videos, are really easy to do at 6mm. You're just dabbing on a blob of red and you're dabbing on a blob of pink for the hands. The idea here isn't to paint beautiful, exquisite, well-detailed, highlighted 6mm miniatures. There is no point. We don't live long enough to do that. We're painting thousands of these models. So you're painting basically a colour by number. You're just giving an impression of the overall colour. On the table, the mass rank and files will give much more depth. So all you really need to do is ensure that you've painted them in a nice bright and bold colour so you can see them from 4 foot away. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you again real soon.